The Kansas sun beat down on Harmony Creek in the summer of 1876, painting the fields in shades of gold and green. It was a time of hard work and simple pleasures, but for Elara Vance, life was anything but simple. Elara was a young woman of 20, with eyes the color of a summer sky and a spirit as wild as the prairie wind. She wasn't one to back down from a challenge or to keep quiet when she saw something wrong. Her hands, though small, were strong from helping her father with their small farm, and her mind was sharp as a newly honed blade. One sweltering afternoon, a fancy carriage pulled by two black horses stopped at their humble farmhouse. Out stepped Mr. Silas Thorne, the richest man in Harmony Creek. Thorne owned the bank, the general store, and most of the land that stretched beyond their fields. He was a man accustomed to getting his way, with a thick mustache and clothes that always looked too fine for the dusty Kansas roads. Today he wore a smile that didn't quite reach his cold, dark eyes. He had come for Elara. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice smooth like polished stone, "I've come to ask for your hand in marriage." Elara looked from Thorne to her father, who stood nervously wringing his hat. She knew what this meant. Marriage to Thorne would solve all their money troubles, but it would also mean giving up her freedom, her very self. Thorne wanted a wife who would be seen and not heard, a pretty ornament for his grand house. Elara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of expectation, but also the fire of her own heart. She would not be bought, not even for comfort. Elara met Mr. Thorne's gaze, her chin held high despite the tremor she felt deep inside. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I thank you for your offer. But I cannot accept." A hush fell over the small yard. Her father gasped, a sound like a dry cough. Thorne's smooth smile vanished, replaced by a dark scowl. His face, usually so composed, flushed a deep red. "Cannot accept," he repeated slowly, as if he hadn't heard correctly. "Do you understand what you are refusing, girl? A life of ease, a home of comfort and security for your family. No more dusty fields, no more endless chores." "I understand it perfectly, sir," Elara replied, her voice gaining strength. "But I also understand that a life without freedom, without respect, is no life for me. I cannot marry a man I do not love, especially one who would expect me to simply be an object." Thorne's eyes narrowed, glittering with a cold fury. He was not used to being told no, especially by a young woman from a simple farm. "You defy me," he snarled, his voice rising. "You, a mere farmer's daughter, dare to insult my generosity." He took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. "Do you know who I am, Elara Vance? I am the backbone of this town. To refuse me is to refuse the very ground you walk on." Elara did not flinch. "I know who you are, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice unwavering. "And I know who I am. My answer remains no." The air crackled with Thorne's anger. He clenched his fists, his body stiff with outrage. "You will regret this, girl," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You will regret this deeply." He turned sharply, his fine coat swirling around him, and stormed back to his carriage. The horses, sensing their master's mood, whinnied nervously as he climbed inside. With a crack of the whip, the carriage sped away, leaving a cloud of dust and a thick silence in its wake. Elara's father rushed to her side, his face pale with fear for what was to come. Thorne's threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, and it wasn't long before its shadow fell upon Elara. 2 days later, as Elara was hanging laundry, two men from the sheriff's office arrived at the farm. They didn't have a warrant, just stern faces and orders from Mr. Thorne himself. Her father pleaded, but it was no use. Elara was told she was to appear before Judge Hawthorne. The courtroom in Harmony Creek was a small, stuffy room, usually reserved for minor arguments over fences or stray livestock. Today, however, it was packed. Whispers filled the air as Elara was led in, her heart pounding but her gaze steady. She saw Mr. Thorne seated prominently in the front row, a smug look on his face. Judge Hawthorne, a portly man with thinning hair and a perpetual frown, was known to be a close friend of Thorne. He rarely questioned Thorne's word, and today was no different. The charges read were vague and twisted. defiance of community standards, disrespect towards a pillar of society, and conduct unbecoming of a young woman. No one mentioned the marriage proposal. Thorne himself spoke, painting Alara as rebellious and ungrateful, someone who threatened the very order of their peaceful town. He spoke of his generous offer and her shocking refusal, twisting her desire for freedom into a dangerous act of insolence. The judge listened, nodding gravely at Thorne's every word. Alara tried to speak to explain her side, but the judge quickly silenced her. "Young woman," he declared, peering over his spectacles, "your outburst just now proves the very point Mr. Thorne is making. This court will not tolerate such insubordination." It was clear then that the trial was a sham, a cruel show put on by Thorne to punish her. Justice, in Harmony Creek, was a luxury only the powerful could afford. The judge's gavel struck the wood with a sharp crack, silencing the murmurs in the courtroom. "Having heard the testimony," Judge Hawthorne announced, his voice booming, "and considering the grave nature of the charges, this court finds Alara Vance guilty." Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had expected it, yet the word guilty still hit her like a physical blow. Her father, seated in the back, groaned softly. Mr. Thorne, however, allowed himself a small, satisfied smirk. "For your insolence," the judge continued, his eyes cold behind his spectacles, "for your blatant disregard of proper conduct, and to ensure that such defiance does not spread through our community, this court sentences you, Alara Vance, to 10 lashes. The punishment will be carried out this afternoon in the town square." A gasp swept through the room. 10 lashes was a brutal punishment, usually reserved for hardened criminals, not for a young woman who had merely spoken her mind. Alara felt a wave of shock, followed by a burning anger. This wasn't about justice. It was about power, about Thorne crushing anyone who dared to stand against him. The injustice of it all fueled a fire within her, even as fear began to creep in. The judge looked directly at Alara, his expression stern. "Let this be a lesson, young woman, that freedom of speech does not extend to disrespecting those who uphold the very fabric of our society." His words were a thinly veiled warning to anyone else in Harmony Creek who might consider questioning Thorne's authority. As the bailiff came to lead her away, Alara glanced at Thorne once more. His eyes held a chilling triumph, a clear message that he had won. But even as she braced herself for the coming pain, Alara refused to let him see her fear. She would face this punishment with the same defiance with which she had spoken her truth. Later that afternoon, the town square, usually bustling with farmers and merchants, was unnaturally quiet. A crowd had gathered, a sea of solemn faces. Curiosity, fear, and a touch of pity flickered in their eyes. In the center of the square stood the whipping post, a rough-hewn timber sunk deep into the earth. Alara was led to it, her hands bound tightly with rope. Her father, his face etched with sorrow, stood at the edge of the crowd, unable to meet her gaze. Mr. Thorne was there too, observing the spectacle from a shaded spot near the general store, his expression unchanged. The bailiff, a burly man named Jade, stood ready, holding a thick leather strap. As Alara was tied to the post, her back turned to the crowd, she closed her eyes for a moment. She could feel the rough wood against her cheek, the tightness of the ropes around her wrists. A shiver ran through her, but she pushed it down. She would not cry out, she would not give Thorne the satisfaction. She would endure. She heard the whispers of the crowd, the shuffling of feet, the strained silence that pressed in on all sides. It felt as though the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for the first lash to fall. The sun beat down, hot and unforgiving, reflecting off the dust on the ground. Alara focused on the feeling of the warm breeze on her skin, trying to prepare her body for the pain that was about to come. Each moment stretched longer and longer, a terrible anticipation filling the air. She braced herself, ready to face the cruel injustice alone. Her defiance was a small, quiet flame within her, refusing to be put out. The bailiff Jade raised the leather strap, the air suddenly thick with dread. Just as he drew it back for the first blow, a voice, calm but firm, cut through the silence. "Stop." Every head in the square turned. A man stepped forward from the edge of the crowd. It was Samuel, the young preacher from the small church on the edge of town. He wasn't a large man, and his clothes were plain, often dusty from his walks to visit distant families. He was known for his quiet kindness and gentle sermons, not for public displays. Alara opened her eyes, surprised to see him. She had seen him around town, a quiet presence, but they had never spoken more than a polite greeting. Samuel walked purposefully towards the whipping post, his eyes fixed on Jade. "This punishment," he stated, his voice now a little louder, "is unjust. This young woman has committed no true crime." Jade, holding the whip midair, looked confused. "Preacher, this is the judge's order." Samuel turned to face the crowd, his gaze sweeping over them, finally resting on Judge Hawthorne, who sat a few feet away, looking annoyed. "The law may demand a penalty," Samuel said, "but God's mercy demands compassion. If a price must be paid, I will pay it." A murmur went through the crowd, a mix of shock and confusion. "Mr." Thorne's smug expression faltered, a flicker of disbelief crossing his face. Samuel continued, his voice steady. "I offer myself to take Miss Vance's punishment. Let the lashes meant for her fall upon my back instead." Alara stared at him, her heart skipping a beat. Why would he do this? Why would anyone willingly take such pain for a stranger? The thought was so unexpected, so brave, it stole her breath. Judge Hawthorne, who had been sitting calmly through the proceedings, suddenly looked flustered. He stood up, adjusting his spectacles. "Preacher Samuel," he huffed, "this is highly irregular. The law demands the guilty party to receive the sentence." Samuel turned to face the judge directly, his quiet strength filling the space between them. "And the good book teaches sacrifice, Judge. It teaches that a shepherd lays down his life for his flock. If this town demands a pound of flesh for a perceived wrong, then let it be mine. My faith calls me to protect the innocent." Mr. Thorne, from his shaded spot, spoke up, his voice sharp with annoyance. "This is nonsense, Judge, a stunt. Let the girl take her due." But the crowd was now buzzing. Many knew Samuel to be a truly good man. His offer, so pure and selfless, touched something deep in their hearts. The judge saw their reaction, saw the way their eyes were fixed on Samuel, not on Thorne. To refuse such an offer of sacrifice, especially from a preacher, would make him look cruel and heartless in the eyes of the townsfolk. It might even make them question the fairness of his court. Hawthorne cleared his throat, a sound like gravel. "Very well," he declared, his voice heavy with reluctant authority. "If Preacher Samuel truly wishes to take on this burden, then I, as judge, will permit it. The lashes intended for Alara Vance will be transferred to him." He gave Samuel a stern look. "But let it be known, Preacher, this is your choice, and the full punishment will be carried out." Alara felt a strange mix of relief and horror. Relief that she wouldn't feel the sting of the whip, but horror that this kind man would suffer in her place. Jade, the bailiff, looked unsure, but with a nod from the judge, he began to untie Alara. Her ropes loosened, and she felt a sudden rush of freedom, quickly replaced by a heavy guilt. Jade the bailiff, his face grim, retied the ropes, but this time around Samuel's wrists. Samuel removed his simple preacher's coat, revealing a plain linen shirt. He offered Alara a small, reassuring smile before turning his back to the crowd and the post. Alara, now free, stood frozen, watching with wide, horrified eyes. The first lash cut through the air with a sickening whistle and landed with a sharp crack against Samuel's back. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Samuel's body tensed, but he made no sound. Alara winced, feeling the imaginary sting on her own skin. Jade raised the whip again, his movements heavy. The second lash struck, then the third. Each time, Samuel's shoulders tightened, but he remained silent, his gaze fixed on some distant point. His quiet strength was more powerful than any shout of pain could have been. Alara could see the red marks appearing on his shirt growing darker with each blow. It was a terrible sight, a good man suffering for no fault of his own, only for his kindness. By the fifth lash, Samuel's breath was coming in ragged gasps, but still, he uttered no cry. His face, when Alara caught a glimpse of it, was pale and beaded with sweat, but his eyes held a calm resolve. He was enduring this pain not just for her, but for a principle, for what he believed was right. The remaining lashes fell, each one a testament to his incredible sacrifice. Alara watched, a knot of admiration and sorrow twisting in her chest. She had never seen such a selfless act. The pain on Samuel's back was a physical mark of the injustice that had been done and a shining example of unexpected compassion. When the 10th lash finally struck, a deep bruise forming on his skin, Samuel slumped slightly against the post, but he was still standing. The crowd was utterly silent, stunned by what they had witnessed. As Jade untied Samuel, the preacher swayed, his strength finally leaving him. Alara rushed forward without a second thought, her hands gently supporting his arm. "Let me help you, Samuel," she said, her voice soft with concern. Her father, shaking off his shock, quickly joined her. Together they helped Samuel walk slowly away from the silent, staring crowd. Mr. Thorne, his triumph now soured, glared as they left, but no one paid him any mind. They brought Samuel to Alara's small farm, a place of quiet refuge. Alara carefully helped him remove his torn shirt, revealing the bruised and bleeding marks on his back. It was worse than she had imagined. She fetched warm water, clean cloths, and her mother's special healing salve made from herbs. With gentle hands, she cleaned his wounds, trying to be as careful as possible. "You didn't have to do that, Samuel," she whispered, her eyes filled with tears. "You suffered for me." Samuel winced as she applied the salve, but he managed a weak smile. Someone had to stand up to injustice, Alara. "And it was clear you weren't going to let them break you. I just made sure they couldn't break your body, too." Over the next few days, Alara tended to Samuel with dedication. As his body slowly began to mend, they spent hours talking. They spoke of their beliefs, their hopes for Harmony Creek, and the kind of world they wished to see. Alara found that Samuel, though quiet, held deep thoughts and a strong sense of right and wrong. He listened to her with true interest, valuing her opinions, something Thorne had never done. She learned about his simple life as a preacher, his desire to help others, and the deep faith that guided his every action. He, in turn, learned about her dreams, her love for the land, and the fierce independence that had led her to defy Thorne. As the days turned into a week, Alara watched Samuel not just heal, but truly be. She saw how he treated her father with gentle respect, listened to her with full attention, and spoke of his church duties with genuine care for his small flock. He never boasted, never demanded, and never tried to force his will upon anyone. His bravery hadn't been a loud, angry roar, but a calm, unwavering stand for what was right, even when it meant great pain for himself. This quiet, deep strength was a stark contrast to Mr. Thorne. Thorne's power was like a blustery wind, making noise and pushing people around. It was a show of force meant to make others afraid and obey. He cared only for his own desires and his own image. Samuel, however, was like a deep, still river, strong and constant, his power flowing from kindness, faith, and a true sense of justice. Alara remembered Thorne's cold eyes and his demand for her to be an object. She remembered his anger when she had simply spoken her mind. With Samuel, it was different. He saw her, truly saw her, as a thinking, feeling person. He respected her ideas and her independent spirit rather than trying to crush them. He didn't want to own her, he wanted to understand her. She often found herself just watching him, whether he was helping her father mend a fence or reading a passage from his worn Bible. His kind heart shone through in every small act. She realized that while Thorne had shown only selfish ambition, Samuel had shown selfless love. This was a man whose strength came from within, a strength that was gentle yet unshakable. Alara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that this was the kind of man she truly admired. Even after Samuel's back had healed, he didn't leave the farm right away. He helped Alara's father with chores, lifting heavy sacks of grain and mending tools with quiet skill. Alara, in turn, often walked with him to his small church, helping him clean and arrange the few hymnals. They found joy in simple things, watching the sunset over the endless prairie, sharing stories by the crackling fire, or simply sitting in comfortable silence. Their friendship grew, strong and steady like an old oak tree. They laughed together, shared their worries, and learned to lean on each other. When a sudden rainstorm threatened to ruin their hay, Samuel was the first to grab a pitchfork, working tirelessly beside Alara and her father until the harvest was safe. When Samuel worried about a sick family in his congregation, Alara would offer practical advice and help, sometimes even bringing them food from her own kitchen. They discovered a shared love for books and would often read aloud to each other in the evenings, the lamplight casting warm shadows around them. Alara found Samuel's insights into the stories to be thoughtful and deep, while he admired her keen understanding and quick wit. They challenged each other's ideas gently, always with respect, and often found their views aligning in unexpected ways. Through these shared moments, a bond formed between them, one deeper than mere acquaintance or even gratitude. It was a true friendship, built on trust, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that comes from seeing each other's true hearts. Alara had never had such a friend, someone who truly saw her, flaws and all, and still valued her company. And Samuel, in turn, found in Alara a spirit as bright and unwavering as his own faith. One evening, as Alara watched Samuel explain a passage from the Bible to her father, a warmth spread through her chest that was more than just friendship. It was a feeling she hadn't known before, a gentle pull towards him that was both comforting and exciting. She saw the light in his eyes when he spoke of his faith, the kindness in his smile when he shared a joke, and the quiet strength in his hands as he gestured. She remembered the fear she had felt when Thorne proposed, the cold dread of being owned. With Samuel, she felt free, seen, and truly valued. Their conversations weren't about power or money, but about truth, kindness, and what mattered most in life. He respected her mind, her independence, and her dreams. He didn't try to change her, he simply appreciated her for who she was. Alara realized that her feelings for Samuel had quietly, steadily, grown into something much deeper than admiration or friendship. It was love. A love built not on grand gestures or promises of wealth, but on the solid ground of shared values, deep respect, and the quiet understanding that had blossomed between them. It was a love that saw beyond outward appearances to the true heart of a person. She thought of the injustice she had faced and how Samuel had stepped forward, ready to bear her pain. That act of pure sacrifice had shown her a kind of love she hadn't known existed outside of stories. It was a love that put another's well-being above one's own, a selfless devotion that resonated with her own strong spirit. Alara knew with a certainty that calmed her heart that this was the love she had unknowingly been searching for. The next Sunday, Samuel preached a sermon about forgiveness and the strength found in love, his voice clear and strong. His back was fully healed now, leaving only faint, silvery scars as a testament to his sacrifice. After the service, as the small congregation slowly left, Samuel approached Alara, who was helping her father tidy up the church. "Alara," he began, his voice a little softer than usual, "may I speak with you for a moment?" They walked outside, the warm Kansas breeze rustling through the leaves of the old oak tree by the church door. The sky was a vast, gentle blue, just like Alara's eyes. Samuel turned to her, his gaze earnest and deep. "Alara," he said, taking her hands in his, "these past weeks, watching you, talking with you, I've come to see a beauty in your spirit that shines brighter than any gold. Your courage, your kindness, your unwavering sense of right, they have touched my heart deeply." He paused, taking a breath. "I love you, Alara. I love your fierce independence, your gentle soul, and the way you stand for what you believe in." Alara's heart fluttered like a bird. To hear those words from Samuel, the man who had faced pain for her, filled her with a joy she never thought possible. "I know my life is simple," he continued, a faint blush on his cheeks, "and I have no great wealth to offer, only my faith, my devotion, and my heart. But I promise to always respect you, to always cherish you, and to stand by your side through every joy and every hardship." He then knelt down on one knee, right there in the dusty churchyard. "Alara Vance, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Alara's eyes, usually so keen and independent, softened with emotion. She looked at Samuel, kneeling before her in the simple churchyard, and a wave of pure happiness washed over her. This was not the arrogant demand of Mr. Thorne, but a humble, heartfelt plea from a man who had already proven his love through selfless action. He offered her respect, partnership, and a love that truly saw her. "Oh, Samuel," she whispered, her voice thick with joy. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." She reached down, pulling him gently to his feet, and then, without a thought, she wrapped her arms around him, holding him close. Samuel held her just as tightly, his cheek resting against her hair. The world seemed to fade away around them, leaving only the warmth of their embrace and the quiet beat of their hearts. She knew with every fiber of her being that this was the truest love she could ever hope for. It wasn't about the grand house Thorne had offered or the security of his wealth. It was about the security of a heart that understood hers, a spirit that matched her own, and a partner who would always stand by her side, not above her. Samuel had shown her that real strength wasn't about power over others, but about the courage to protect and to serve. The memory of the whipping post, the injustice, and Thorne's cruel triumph now seemed distant. They hadn't broken her, and in their place something beautiful had grown. Alara knew that with Samuel, her life would be filled with purpose, kindness, and a love that was richer than any fortune. She had found her redemption not in escaping punishment, but in finding a soulmate who embodied everything good and true. A few months later, under the same vast Kansas sky, Alara and Samuel stood before their small community, ready to be married. It was a simple ceremony at the little church, but the air buzzed with a deep joy that far surpassed any grand celebration. Every face in the congregation, from Alara's tearful father to the humble farmers and their families, beamed with warmth and happiness. Even Judge Hawthorne was present, his usual stern face softened by the occasion, while Mr. Thorne was nowhere to be seen. Their vows were simple, yet filled with meaning. Samuel promised to love, honor, and cherish Alara, just as he had promised to protect the innocent. Alara, looking into his kind eyes, promised her heart and her unwavering spirit, knowing she had found a true partner. Their marriage became more than just the joining of two hearts. It was a beacon of hope for Harmony Creek. It showed everyone that even in the face of great unfairness and cruel power, goodness could shine through. Samuel's selfless act had not only saved Alara from pain, but it also opened the town's eyes to a different kind of strength, one built on compassion, not fear. Alara and Samuel built a life together, one filled with quiet joy, shared purpose, and unwavering love. They worked their small farm, helped their neighbors, and continued to be voices for fairness and kindness in their community. Their story was whispered from generation to generation, a gentle reminder that even the darkest injustice can lead to unexpected redemption, and that a true heart is the greatest treasure of all. In 1876 Kansas, love born from sacrifice had indeed found its way home.